Good evening. I'm political editor Dennis Welch, and this is Politics Unplugged, a big week and a major announcement that could shape Arizona politics for years to come. Arizona Congressman Trent Frank's announcing his resignation and makes it immediate. And we'll have the latest coming up on that in just a little bit. But we start tonight at the Arizona State Capitol, where 4 lawmakers say House Speaker J.D. Mesnard needs to apply the rules equally when it comes to members accused of wrongdoing. This after Don Shooter was removed from his leadership position after he was accused of sexual harassment, but 2 female lawmakers accused of inappropriate relationships have stayed in place. And some say that is not fair. And joining us right now to talk about that is state lawmaker Maria Syms, one of the 4 female lawmakers who sent a letter to Speaker Mesnard asking him to remove Rios and Michelle Ugenti-Rita from their leadership positions. Both just wanted to talk to you about that. What made you decide to send that letter to the Speaker?
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. So it was a number of us. Now the letter has been signed by 12 members of the House. And it was the concern for the integrity of the process, making sure that the rules, very simply, are applied equally, regardless of party, regardless of gender. The allegations rose to a level where the Speaker determined that we needed to have an outside taxpayer-funded investigation. And so, therefore, in order to ensure that the process goes correctly, we want to make sure the rules are applied equally.
But these are different accusations, because the accusation made against Mr. Shooter is that of sexual harassment. Now, there's no allegations made against Michelle Ugenti-Rita or Rebecca Rios that there was any form of harassing behavior there. In fact, it appears that those accusations about them having inappropriate relationships with staff members was consensual. Don't you fear you're kind of conflating the 2 issues?
No, I don't think so at all. I think that you're getting into what the details of an investigation might show, and the letter has nothing to do with that. The letter basically says, as I indicated, that if it rises to the level that you need a taxpayer-funded investigation, that we need to apply the rules equally. And in fact, I think the allegations were sexual misconduct. Whatever that may be, we need to root it out, do a fair, full, thorough investigation. And if anybody has been victimized in any of these circumstances, we need to make sure that there's accountability, absolutely. And I believe there's also an allegation with respect to one of the people you mentioned of sexually obscene comments made in a public hearing to colleagues. So that certainly is something that should give people pause. And as my colleague, Representative Norgaard, recently said, when legislators are behaving badly, sometimes they need a timeout. Well,
let's talk a little bit about that video that came out. Now, we're talking about Michelle Ugenti-Rita, and she was in a committee hearing several years ago, and she had made a lewd comment regarding a fellow member. Now, that was out in the public, I believe that was 2011, 2012. That was several years ago. It's been reported on. It's not been a new allegation, something new that is surfacing. Why go after this now? It appears to me, or appears to some people, that this could be going after someone who is claiming to be a victim here and going after them.
Well, again, that was before my time, and I'm not familiar with what facts would come out of the investigation surrounding that. And I'm glad you brought up the question of being a victim. I just want to make the point that I have been a career advocate for victims. I myself have advocated on Capitol Hill for the Victims' Rights Amendment to the Constitution. Last year, we had a very successful year for victims with our rape kit testing for victims. As a former Assistant Attorney General, as a former Assistant United States Attorney, I have fought for victims, and I'm very sympathetic to their cause. But there might be victims on all sides in this, and we need to fully vet it and root out sexual harassment, sexually hostile work environment, sexual misconduct, wherever it exists. Because when I'm out there with the public, I can tell you, they're kind of fed up with these stories. They expect their representatives and their elected officials to act appropriately when they're doing the public's work.
Okay, let's talk a little bit then about Representative Rebecca Rios. Now, she is the highest-ranking member in the Democrats in the State House. And the chairman of the Ethics Committee, Republican Eddie Farnsworth, has recently said that he doesn't see anything in this complaint that was filed against her that would warrant an ethics investigation. Where are you on that? I mean, do you think then she should still be removed from her leadership position at this point?
Not at all. The process worked, and Mr. Farnsworth conducted, or we had an outside investigator. Mr. Farnsworth looked at that investigative report, and the Ethics Committee made a determination, and I support whatever due process the Ethics Committee went through and what their determination is. I have no reason to question it.
And so how has this changed? Do you think this is changing the culture at the state capitol then in a good way? Because, you know, privately some people have been telling me that, yeah, people are starting to change their behavior. They're starting to recognize and be more cautious about how they act, what they say in front of people.
Well, I think it's long overdue. And like I said earlier, the public is not going to withstand their elected officials behaving badly. And we're at a watershed moment in our country. And this is an opportunity for the House. I would like to see the Arizona House be an example to the rest of the country of how we can act appropriately, how we can reform our rules to make sure we're not creating a sexually hostile work environment. We're not creating circumstances that would give rise to sexual harassment claims. I hope to work with the Speaker and leadership and my fellow members in order to do that.
So moving forward then, what do you think needs to be done to tackle this issue of sexual harassment?
I think number one, I'm sad to say we actually need a code of conduct that talks about what do we want to do with respect to staff relationships with representatives. When I talk to the people out there and I ask them, do you think a representative should be engaging in sexual relations with staffers? They say absolutely not.
Sure.
We're down there to serve the people. And the people do not want representatives down there serving themselves.
Okay, so are you going to continue then at this point then to ask the Speaker to remove Michelle Ugenti-Rita from any of her positions of authority?
I think the letter stands and it speaks for itself. We now have 12 members that have signed on to it, and the Speaker has said that he will take it under advisement, and I think that's fair, and we'll wait to see what happens.
Oh, no, continue, please.
And I just want to add, I didn't want to finish this without talking about how important this discussion is and how it led to legislation that we're now considering that I introduced last week about confidentiality agreements to close the sexual predator loophole so that we can stop these predators from going on and victimizing others. And it's an important conversation to have.
And, well, let me ask you then, as a female lawmaker down at the Capitol, have you ever been in a situation where you felt uncomfortable, that where you were harassed or somebody had made lewd, inappropriate comments?
Certainly nothing that would rise to the level where I would make a complaint or a report, but I've been asked this many times, and I would say this. I'm a woman who's had a 25-year career in law and in public service, and I think you'd be hard-pressed to find any woman with that kind of track record who has not experienced some form of sexual harassment in her career.
And how do you think your leadership as House Speaker Mesnard and those, how do you think they are handling this issue?
I'm very encouraged that Speaker Mesnard answered the call to have a codified written sexual harassment policy. I actually worked with him. Other houses across the country have their own sexual harassment and sexual misconduct policies, so we've implemented one. I think it's a good start. I think we need to do more. For example, the Florida State House has a code of conduct about sexual relationships between members and staff, and they say it's off limits.
All right. Well, that's all the time we have for this segment, but thank you very much for joining us here.